Right, we'll move to question time with Senator Brockman.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. Today, we saw thousands of farmers and truckies rallying outside Parliament House, many of whom have travelled up to thousands of kilometres from Western Australia to stand up for their livelihoods, to stand up for their communities, to stand up for their families after the appalling decision of the Albanese government to abolish live sheep exports. Minister, why was the Prime Minister too gutless to face these farmers outside Parliament House and explain why he has legislated to destroy their livelihoods and a successful Australian export industry?
Thank you. I'm going to ask for silence before I call the Minister. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President, and thank you to Senator Brockman for the question. And Australia is a democracy and people can protest, and people are entitled to come and put their views to our parliament and to do so respectfully. And protests of many shapes and sizes and on different issues have been seen, have been part of our democracy for a very long time.
Order, Senator Ruston. I called for order. I reminded senators in this chamber that they needed to listen in silence before I called the minister. That includes you, Senator Ruston. Minister, please continue.
Thank you. I understand the Prime Minister did meet with a delegation, and I'm sure I haven't spoken to him about it, but I'm sure that they put their views, and he would have put ours. And our views are that—
Order. Order. And Senator Ruston, I believe that your scarf needs to be turned around so it can't be read or taken off. Minister Wong, please continue.
Well, people in this democracy can disagree, but do so respectfully, something I might remind Senator Ruston about. The primary producers are a very important part of our economy and our community, and I appreciate that people don't agree with the decision the government has made to honour an election commitment, but it was an election commitment. It was an election commitment that has been taken to the Australian people, I think, not on one but two occasions, and we have sought to fulfil that, consistent with the pledges we made to the Australian people. We have given— this was a trade, obviously, that was already declining. This is a trade where we have given a substantial notice of the phase-out and are seeking to assist with an orderly transition by investing $107 million into—
Thank you. Senator Brockman, first supplementary.
Minister, latest figures show the flocks—
beg your pardon. Sorry, Senator Brockman. There was 10 seconds to go. If we can put 10 seconds back on the clock. I have asked— OK, so I'm going to— Senator Brockman, if we set the clock again, I'll ask you to start again on your first supplementary.
I would like to finish my answer.
Okay,
I was sitting down because
down.
Senator Ruston continues to interject.
So just so—
So I will—
Order. Order.
There is a—
Order.
Do you want to answer?
Order across the chamber. There was 10 seconds left on the clock. Minister Wong has indicated she has not finished her contribution. Senator Wong, I invite you to continue for the next 10 seconds.
I would make the point that—
Senator McGrath. Minister, please continue.
That this government has put a very substantial amount into assistance to try and manage an orderly transition and to ensure jobs are in Australia.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Brockman, first supplementary.
Minister, latest figures show the flock size in Western Australia dropping by 27% in 1 year, with industry experts predicting a 35% decline in lamb
Senator
numbers. Your government promised more processing in WA to replace live exports. But these numbers clearly show you are destroying the West Australian sheep industry. Minister, can you look those outside the building in the eye, fighting for their future, fighting for the industry that they love, and tell them that the process—
Minister Wong.
For the senator to finish. I leave.
Please finish. Thanks.
And tell them that the processors won't also close on the back of declining sheep numbers.
Thank you, Senator Brockman. Minister Wong.
Thank you for the question, Senator Brockman. Can I make a few points about the size and trajectory of this industry? In 2014-15, 2.1 million sheep were exported by sea at a value of $224 million. In 21-22, 475,000 sheep were exported by sea at a value of $80 million. So over the decade that the Liberals and Nationals were in government, live sheep exports decreased by 144 million and over 1.5 million head. Meanwhile, 1.5 million. So let's remember when those opposite were in government, we saw a reduction in this trade by value and a very substantial reduction by head. So I do respect that this is a difficult transition for those families and producers who have been in this trade for a long time, but this is a trade that has been
thank you, Minister. The time
under
for
you in
answering
decline.
has expired. Senator Brockman, second supplementary.
The Albanese government has banned the successful live sheep export sector, blocked job-creating mining projects, created chaos in the construction sector and driven up electricity prices for all Australians. Why is the Albanese government prioritising implementation of extreme policies of their friends and allies, the Australian Greens, and not delivering what's best for Australians?
Order. Order. Order across the chamber. Senator Watt and Senator McKenzie, that applies to both of you. Minister, please start your question.
Thank you, President. Well, I would invite the senator to look at the work we did to reopen China as an export market for our barley exporters.
How's those barley exports
I would ask the senator to consider, and I would say to the sector, we have had live cattle exports grow by 54%, and we have exports of beef to Indonesia hit a record high in 22-23. I would remind those opposite that we have seen, under the work this government has done, increase in the exports of wine. We have seen some $20 billion of impediments that were in place when we came to government under you, which primarily affected some of the sectors that were included in your question. And we have seen that trade impediments have been removed on all of those sectors other than $1 billion worth as at the time of those impediments being imposed.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Marielle Smith.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Minister Wong. In my state of South Australia, parents often tell me how concerned they are over social media and the risk of harm that it's presenting to their children. South Australia has, of course, introduced landmark new laws to protect children and to support parents. Can the minister explain what the Albanese government is doing alongside the South Australian government to keep children safe online?
Order. Just a moment, Senator Wong. Senator McKenzie, you need to cover that shirt or remove it. Senator McKenzie, it's a prop. Cover it or remove yourself from the chamber. Order. 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 Senator McKenzie, I think your shirt is still visible, so I think you need to turn it inside out or leave the chamber. Order. Order. Senator McKenzie and all of the senators who think this is funny, props are not allowed in this chamber, nor are T-shirts or other paraphernalia that has words which are clearly visible. Senator McKenzie, I've given you a choice. No, it's not okay. Senator McKenzie, unless you intend for the whole of question time to sit there and hold the blazer, that is not appropriate. I've given you an option. No, I've given you an option. Minister Wong.
Thank you. Well, I'm very happy to answer a question about the safety of our children. And thank you, Senator Smith, for asking this question. And I think all of us know the extent to which this is an issue that parents are really concerned about. And parents are looking for leadership and for guidance and for help in how all of us manage what is a pretty tricky thing to negotiate or to put boundaries around with our children. And I'm sure you have found that this is something parents raise with you, and parents and grandparents. And so we know, of course, that social media can cause social harm and is taking kids away from real friends and experiences. And more importantly, we know that early access to social media can be very detrimental for young people's mental health and physical health. People want real solutions, and we as a government believe that working for the safety of our children is paramount, and that's why today the Prime Minister has announced we will introduce legislation to enforce a minimum age for access to social media and other digital platforms, other relevant digital platforms. That legislation will be informed by engagement with states and territories, and I do want to acknowledge the role of Peter Malinauskas, the Premier of South Australia, who has been engaging with not only his community but also with the Prime Minister on this issue. I'm very pleased that has resulted in the announcement that the Prime Minister has made. As Peter Malinauskas has said, as Premier Malinauskas has said, the work that South Australia has done is important, but we need a nationwide solution. A nationwide solution. And it is a Commonwealth. I'm surprised you are laughing about this. Most parents actually care about this issue. You know, the community cares about this issue and they're laughing about it. It's quite extraordinary. A Commonwealth-led approach will ensure all Australian children are better protected from online harm.
Senator Marielle Smith, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. It certainly is a huge issue and an issue of concern for all Australian parents. Can the minister outline how the Albanese government's approach, including the age assurance trial, will ensure effective social media age limits?
Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. As I said, a Commonwealth-led approach will ensure that all the children are better protected from online harms and ensure parents and carers are better supported. And we also want to hold big tech to account, because platforms and online services have a responsibility for the safety of their users. And I hope this is something on which we can get agreement across this chamber. As I said, we will work with the states and territories to get this right. We are also going to consider the results of the various measures that Minister Rowland has put in place, the Age Assurance Trial and the Online Safety Act review. These measures have been welcomed by the eSafety Commissioner, and the trial in particular is testing different implementation approaches to help inform policy design. We want to work with experts, young people, advocates and parents through the trial, because we want these laws to be effective and we want to make sure that big tech plays their part in protecting users.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Smith, second supplementary.
Thank you, Minister, for outlining our government's approach. Can you explain why the Albanese government is taking action on this important issue now?
Thank you, Senator Smith. Minister Wong.
Thank you. And I hear what those oppositors say. And they're telling us that, why hasn't this been done before? Why hasn't there been more action? I wonder what could have happened over nearly a decade of government. I mean, if only they'd been in power for nearly a decade. When the explosion in the online world really occurred, if only someone in power then thought that this might be an issue. Occasionally in politics it is a good thing to say, yeah, this is a good idea. Occasionally in this chamber it is a good thing to say, that is a good idea and we're going to back it. But they can't help themselves, can they? They can't help themselves. They have to. They're doing it again. Look at this. Here we are. Both sides of politics might actually do something about about safety of children, but those opposite just want to get angry about it. Well, we on this side, we want to make sure that protection of our children is paramount, and that is what we will do, and that is what we will legislate.
Senator Cash, once again, I called you to order, and you didn't come to order. I would ask you to not wilfully continue on when I've called you to order. Senator Davey.
My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Agriculture, Minister Watt. There are thousands of farmers rallying at Parliament House today, devastated by years of the Labor government's anti-farming agenda, which over the last 2 years has scrapped live sheep exports and the ag visa, slapped farmers with a fresh food tax, a truckie tax, a ute tax and a superannuation tax on family farms, forced water buybacks, ballooned electricity bills and cut or delayed regional infrastructure funding. How will the Albanese Labor government policies do anything other than punish regional Australia and the farmers who feed our nation, while further driving up the cost of living for all Australian families?
Thank you, Senator Davey. Senator Davey, Senator McCarthy is the repping minister. I note you've put the question to Senator Watt, so it's really up to you.
Go to the relevant repping minister.
Thank
Senator
you.
McCarthy.
Sorry, Senator McCarthy.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator, for your question. We are concerned, obviously, for all Australians, and that certainly does mean our producers, our farmers right across the country. And we certainly acknowledge the 400 protesters who gathered out there today. As Senator Wong said in her response to the previous, we certainly had.
Hey, oi! Order.
Senator Wong.
They're still going. They're still going.
Order.
They're still going.
Order.
Are you unable just to stop? I am saying. Point.
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Cash, just prior to Senator Davey getting on her feet, I reminded you that when I called order, it applied to you. I will advise you that I will use the Standing Order 203. Now, if you don't agree with the response a minister makes, then that is what taking note is for, or indeed the open-ended adjournment. It is not an opportunity for you to continue to interject across the chamber. Minister McCarthy.
Thank you, President, and I will just address that for a moment. This isn't the concern about the hundreds of people that are out the front. No. In terms of numbers, Senator. In terms of numbers, Senator Cash.
Order.
What I was saying, which none of you have picked up on, is that we are concerned about all Australians, especially those people on the land.
Please resume your seat. Order. Order. If you can't remain silent, I invite you to leave the chamber. Goes for Senator McGrath, Senator O'Sullivan, Senator Davey. Minister McCarthy, please continue. Thank
you, President. And I do urge the opposition to give me a chance to respond here. We are very, very concerned about all Australians, including our farming sector. The Albanese Labor government is committed to a robust, sustainable ag industry that continues to thrive in Australia. Since coming to government in 2022, we've been delivering for Australian farmers and producers, strengthening biosecurity, boosting the ag workforce, opening new trade opportunities and improving farm sustainability. We've delivered over $3 billion in extra funding for agriculture since taking office. Right. Despite the tight fiscal environment we find ourselves in, we're getting on with the job of fixing what the previous coalition government failed or couldn't be bothered to do, fixing the $100 million black hole left in the biosecurity budget, and we're actually taking action on climate change and helping industry meet its own climate targets after 10 years of denial from those opposites.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Davey, first supplementary.
Minister, recent data from the MDBA shows that water diversions are now 23% below sustainable diversion limits, yet the Labor government is continuing to prioritise buybacks out of farming communities. Why does the Labor government only look at buybacks as a solution and ignore real degradation drivers like European carp? When will the government listen to farmers rather than acting against them?
Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. A point of order. That relates to a policy area that is not in the agricultural portfolio. It's in.
Senator Ruston.
Really?
Thank you, Minister.
She's
Thank
very
you, Minister
upset
Wong. I
today.
think Senator Birmingham also has a point of order. If
Well,
you finish
I don't think. Well, with respect, what I'd ask the senator to consider is if she wants to recast her supplementary question, buybacks are clearly not the responsibility of the agriculture portfolio.
Just a moment, Senator Davey. I'll come back to you, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, President. On the point of order, President, Senator Davey's primary question referenced a number of impacts on farming communities, of which she identified water buybacks as one of those impacts in the primary question. This is a supplementary question going into that issue. The idea that water buybacks do not have an impact on the agriculture portfolio is a preposterous idea. They may not be the direct responsibility of the agriculture portfolio, but that is like suggesting that industry policy doesn't impact the Treasury portfolio or a range of other areas where the impacts on industry.
I intend to, Senator Wong, I'm intending to respond.
Specifically to sustainable diversion limits, that is very clearly a matter not within this portfolio. It cannot possibly be addressed to this minister.
Order. Senator Birmingham, order. I am advised by the clerk that Senator Davey should be given the opportunity to recast her question and link it to— and Senator Birmingham, you are not in a debate with me. I'm ruling on a point of order. Senator Davey, I invite you to recast your question and link it to agriculture.
With pleasure. Minister, recent MDBA data shows that irrigation farmers in the Murray-Darling Basin are using well below what has been identified as sustainable diversion limits. Yet your government continues to buy water from them, impacting negatively their communities. Why don't you listen to the farmers and review your policies on how you treat irrigation farmers?
Thank you, Senator Davey. Minister McAllister.
Thank you, President.
Minister McCarthy.
Thank you, President. I do believe, as Senator Wong has said, that this part of this question does go to a fellow minister. But please, let me finish. If I may finish, President. If I may finish, I would like to make reference to the question itself in terms of correcting Senator Davey that we aren't just buying.
Order.
We are not buying back water only. We are funding water infrastructure.
Yep.
And water efficiency projects, Senator Davies, and you know that. You know that. And so does Mr Littleproud know that. In fact, I don't think he's got that great a record either. I understand that he wasn't that welcome there today with the farmers in terms of the water as well.
Senator McGrath, order.
Poor David. Nobody likes David.
McCarthy, please. Order. Order. Senator McGrath, I've called you to order 3 times. You ignored me. I remind you as well of Standing Order 203. Minister McCarthy.
Thank you, President. Well, as I was saying, it was noticed, other than other things that the opposition have said, it was noticed that the farmers were not happy with the Leader of the Nationals either. So I suspect—
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Thank you, Minister. Senator Davies, second supplementary.
Minister, Australian farmers have now seen their pea contracts cut by 34% because Coles is importing peas from overseas. Similar scenes have been faced by SPC and Shepparton when the big supermarkets purchased imported fruits for their tinned fruits. Why is under Labor our farmers always getting done over? Is it any wonder that the farmers are out the front of Parliament House rallying today?
Order. Senator McCarthy.
President, well, we know that people can hold protests. It is a democracy in this country. But I will correct Senator Davey. We have been doing a tremendous amount in this area, and as I've outlined already in my previous responses, we've also been fixing the APVMA after it became a dysfunctional mess at the hands of Barnaby's forced move to Armidale. The opposition spent almost a decade neglecting and eroding our trade relationships.
Minister
They
McCarthy,
destroyed.
please resume your seat. Order. Minister Gallagher.
But the behaviour of the opposition this question time is really getting to a new low. They are ignoring your direction. Minister McCarthy can't answer unless she is shouting. You should come to order.
Thank you, Minister Gallagher. I'm sure that you have witnessed that I am doing my very best. I have reminded particular senators of Standing Order 203, and I will request that for the remainder of the minister's question that people listen in silence. Minister McCarthy.
Thank you, President. I'll just have to say some of the things I've just said, just in case they didn't hear it, that the opposition spent almost a decade neglecting and eroding our trade relationships. They destroyed the relationship with our biggest trading partner, which our government has restored. We've opened new trade opportunities that allow the industry to continue to grow and remain competitive, and agricultural exports are now more diversified than ever, thanks to the Albanese Labor government.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Hanson-Young.
Thank you, President. My question is to Senator McAllister, representing the Environment Minister. Any day now, Tamboran Resources has announced it will commence gas fracking in the Beetaloo Basin in the Northern Territory. This is a project that will take over 1 billion litres of water and generate risky, toxic waste, but has not even been assessed for its impact on the environment or indeed the water table. Has the minister bothered to consider pulling the water trigger? Why has the minister not used her powers given to her by this parliament to make sure this project is called in?
Thank you, Senator Hanson-Young. Senator McAllister.
Thanks very much, President. Well, as the senator knows, all projects must comply with national environmental law, and that includes, of course, the expanded water trigger that was introduced by the Albanese government. Now, the proponent for the project that the senator refers to, Tamboran, has been reminded of this on multiple occasions. And they also know that any breach of national environment law will be treated extremely seriously. Now, these changes to the water trigger occurred after the Albanese government passed our first tranche of environmental law last year to add unconventional gas to the water trigger under national environment law, and we have been extremely clear with industry to help them implement their obligations. Now, the Department of Climate Change, Energy, the Environment and Water wrote to known companies with activities in the Beetaloo Basin, including Tamboran Resources, to inform them of the new obligations that may apply to these operations under the recent water trigger amendments. I understand that the Minister's office has also spoken to these companies and reminded them of the requirements under the Act. I am also advised that the Minister has not received a referral for these activities. And the reality of the law, Senator Hanson-Young, is that the exploration in question is authorised by the Northern Territory government. And so the department that the Minister Plibersek administers continues to work closely with the Northern Territory government to understand the impact of authorised exploration and whether that could have significant impacts on Commonwealth-protected matters, including water, and that is consistent with the law.
Thank you, Minister McCarthy. Senator Hanson-Young, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners joining us in the chamber today, who have come all the way from the Northern Territory to call on the government to do more than simply write a letter. Do more than simply write a letter. There is power within the laws, and they want the Environment Minister to pull the water trigger, to call in this project and show some leadership.
Thank you, Senator Hanson-Young. Minister McAllister.
Well, Senator, as we've discussed in this chamber more than once, and as we've talked about in estimates, the minister's obligations are to follow the law, and as you'd expect, her obligations are also to make decisions in a way that are legally sound and that withstand legal challenge. And to that extent, the minister is incredibly conscious that it is a legal question as to whether the water trigger in the ledge applies to any particular development. And she has repeatedly made clear that as a potential decision-maker, it is inappropriate to express an opinion about the question that you raise at this stage. As I've already indicated in my response to your primary question, the minister is taking steps to receive advice from the Territory Government and also from her department.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Hanson-Young, second supplementary.
Thank you. The Labor Party lost 10 seats in the Northern Territory election only a couple of weeks ago. How many more seats are you prepared to lose before you take action? Will the minister pick up the phone today and tell Tamboran, stop right there? Stop what you're doing before this is properly assessed.
Order. Order. Senator Hughes, when you've quite finished, and Senator Canavan. Minister McCarthy, obviously the first part of your question is not, Minister McAllister, the first part of the question is not within your scope, but the second part is. Thank you.
Thanks very much, President. And I acknowledge, of course, that these issues attract very strong interest from community members. And may I particularly acknowledge the elders from the Northern Territory who have travelled here today. And I know that this will be a question that is important to communities. But the question, as you've put it to me, Senator Hanson-Young, asks the minister to take a series of steps without having consideration to the law. In fact, what it more particularly asks the minister to do is to take a series of steps in having regard to a whole set of issues that are not relevant to the questions a minister must consider under the legislation. As I've indicated, the minister has asked her department to provide advice to her to ensure her that all the companies operating in the Beetaloo Basin are complying with their obligations under the Act.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Stewart.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister for Women, Senator Gallagher. The Prime Minister convened National Cabinet last week, bringing together all jurisdictions to work together to address the scourge of gender-based violence. Addressing violence is a priority in both Working for Women, a national strategy for gender equality, and the National Plan to End Violence Against Women and Children. Can the Minister please update the Senate on the outcomes of National Cabinet, and how is the government working to improve the lives of women across Australia?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much, President. I thank Senator Stewart for the question and for her ongoing commitment to driving gender equality. Indeed, all of the members of the government Senate team in doing that work. Too many women live in fear and too many lives have been stolen. Too many women live with ongoing trauma from their experience of violence in this country. And it's not just women's safety and well-being. Gender-based violence stands in the way of women achieving their potential, including their economic potential. This is why ending gender-based violence has been such a priority for the Albanese Labor government. Last Friday, the National Cabinet did agree to a $4.7 billion package that harnesses important opportunities to work together to prevent violence and, importantly, to support and provide certainty to community-based legal services. This important package brings together efforts and funding to deliver much-needed support for frontline specialists and legal services in responding to gender-based violence, better innovative approaches to better identify and respond to high-risk perpetrators to stop violence escalating, and addressing the roles that systems and harmful industries play in exacerbating violence. The package includes a range of measures, including $3.9 million for a new national access to justice partnership, including a critical $800 million funding uplift, with a focus on uplifting legal services responding to gender-based violence. For the first time, we will provide ongoing funding certainty beyond the 5-year agreement, so that that sector does have that certainty that's been so badly needed. This is new money. The former government, of course, had left a funding cliff with no funding for these critical services beyond the mid-2025s. We've addressed that cliff and uplifted the funding, and we've also agreed to a new national partnership agreement on family, domestic and sexual violence responses.
Senator Stewart, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. Achieving gender equality relies on women being safe and economically secure. Can you please outline the work the government has done to drive gender equality, including initiatives that are supporting the economic security of women?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much. I thank Senator Stewart for the supplementary, and it's an important one because we can't look at women's safety in isolation from other areas where we need to address gender inequality. And that's why in our government, when we are going through the budget process, we are assessing every NPP, every new proposal against what it means for women. In this country, we do gender analysis to make sure that we fully understand the implications of those decisions that we're taking. So that helped to inform our revised tax cuts so that more women received more of those tax cuts, and 90% of women being better off. It's informed the decisions we've taken around PPL, to extend PPL and then also to add superannuation to PPL. In terms of the work we've done around early childhood educators and aged care workers, a highly feminised industry where 90% on average are women in that sector, that has informed the decisions we've taken to support pay rise. Publishing employer gender pay gaps. The list is too long.
Senator Stewart, second supplementary.
Thank you. It is inspiring to hear about the progress the Albanese Labor government has made on gender equality in just 2 years and what is possible when you make it a priority. As the first majority women government in Australian political history, it is clear that having women in parliament drives policy change. How important has it been to increase the number of women in parliament and around the decision-making tables of government?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much, President. I thank Senator Stewart for that question too, because it is important, having served in a government where I was the only member in the cabinet, to serving in a cabinet now with record-level numbers of women and serving in a caucus where more women than men are members of that caucus for the first time in Australian political history. I'm very proud, and it does make a difference. 30 years ago, the Labor Party set affirmative action targets, and we're now the government that has 52% women, but 100% supported to making women's lives better and pursuing gender equality. And look over this side and then look over that side. And I've got a message for the Liberal Party, the coalition. You know your big problem? You know your big problem as you drive gender equality is you keep pre-selecting men. That's the problem. It's really easy. You've just got to stop pre-selecting as many men and pre-select a few more women, and then you might get more women in your
thank
caucus.
You, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator David Pocock.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Science and Research, Senator Farrell. Australia's R&D expenditure is just 1.68% of GDP, well below the OECD average of 2.72% and well below the government's own target of 3%. Federal government spending on R&D is the lowest on record, sitting at just 0.17% of GDP, with business expenditure falling to 0.9%. In the federal budget, the government said it will commission a strategic examination of Australia's R&D system, noting that this was almost 4 months ago now. Can the Minister please provide an update on when this review will commence and when the terms of reference will be released?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister Farrell.
President, and can I thank Senator Pocock for his question on what is a very important issue for this government. You did mention the figure of 1.68%, which was the figure that occurred during the time of the last government, the Liberal coalition government. Of course, the time when this research peaked, of course, was when it was at 2.25%, and that was when the Labor Party was in government. So the Labor Party has a strong record in this area, and of course, as a government, we want a vibrant, growing research and development ecosystem that is going to be particularly significant, Senator Pocock, for the government's program of Future Made in Australia. As you say, we have commissioned a strategic examination of the research and development in Australia. The review will look at the system-wide transformations that can turn our homegrown research and innovation into long-term prosperity and growth, and it will be supported by a panel of eminent experts to guide the government's thinking on research and development. The government has announced, as you said, its intention to undertake an examination of the research and development in Australia in May of this year. I understand that Minister Husic is currently consulting across government, and that will obviously include you, and will have more to say in coming weeks. This examination will be comprehensive and consider what Australia can learn from other countries in this area.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Pocock, first supplementary.
Thanks, President. Thank you, Minister. The Universities Accord devoted significant time and attention to R&D and recommended that the Australian Government commission a formal strategic cross-portfolio examination of national research funding. Is there a difference in ambition between what the Accord recommended and what the Government is now looking to do with this review? Will this be a high-level whole-of-government review or just a desktop audit?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Pocock for his first supplementary question. I think it should be clear from my first answer, Senator Pocock, that the Albanese government is ambitious in this area. The whole structure behind Future Made in Australia is all about developing our homegrown technologies, our homegrown ideas, so that we can transform those ideas into prosperity. We want to work with all of those groups in our community that are interested in achieving these ambitious goals. So the short answer to your question, I think, is no. There's no differences there. We are both very ambitious, and of course we are very lucky to have a minister like Minister Husic in this area, who's devoted to achieving the best possible results for our
thank you, Minister.
research.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Pocock, second supplementary.
President, and thank you, Minister. Minister, grave concerns have been raised about the impact of the government's proposed cap on international students and what it will have on universities' ability to cross-subsidise more than $7.7 billion on research annually. Will the review take these concerns into consideration? Does the government have a plan to actually fund research at universities in the short term?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister Farrell.
Well, there's an old saying, Senator Pocock, you don't buy a dog and bark yourself.
You heard that one before?
Hey? Hey? No, you don't buy a dog and bark yourself. From
order across the chamber.
From
Senator Scarr.
Welcome back, Senator Mackenzie. So we've set up, as your first question made clear, Senator Pocock, we've set up a review. It's going to be full of eminent citizens in this country.
Senator Ruston.
I don't think there's a link between what we're going to be doing in the research space and what we've been required to do in terms of capping the number of overseas students. I don't think there's a link between.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Just before I come to you, Senator Van, I'll welcome our guests. So I draw to the attention of honourable senators the presence in the gallery of a delegation from Malaysia as part of the Canberra Fellowship Program. On behalf of all senators, I wish you a warm welcome to Australia and in particular to the Senate. Senator Van.
Thank you, President. And my question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Defence, Senator Wong. Minister, the 2023 Defence Strategic Review, the National Defence Strategy, the Defence Industry Development Strategy, all were at pains to point out that Australia needs the capability to build and maintain long-range strike here in Australia. Can the Minister disclose which companies have been contracted to our organisation that's doing that, GWEO?
Thank you, Senator Van. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. If I just on indulgence, just say to our friends from Malaysia, Selamat Datang. It's great to have you here, and we thank you for your friendship. In relation to the Guided Weapons and Explosive Ordnance Program, or GWEO, as it is known, as you know, Senator, the government is very focused on making decisions to keep Australians safe and to create a future made in Australia. And an aspect of that is the delivery of a sovereign guided weapons enterprise. And we've backed this up through our actions. We will start manufacturing missiles in Australia next year. We've committed up to $21 billion over the next decade. There has been the acquisition of long-range strike weapons, and recently my colleague Senator Conroy announced the government would invest some $850 million to manufacture long-range missiles in Australia in partnership with Kongsberg, I think it's pronounced Kingsburg, but in Kongsberg Defence in Australia. The factory in Newcastle will be able to manufacture both the Joint Strike and Naval Strike missiles, and it will be the first factory outside of Norway to make these missiles.
Wong, please resume your seat. Senator Van.
Just on a point of order of relevance, I was asking for the key companies that have been contracted to provide weapons to GWEO.
Yep, and I accept that was the question at the end, but you also went to the strategic review and the need for particular weaponry and so on. So the Minister is being relevant to the question, but I'll continue to listen. Thank you, Senator Van.
I'm sorry, Senator. I thought this was directly relevant. I'm happy to try and get further information from DPMO if that assists. Mr Conroy has also announced the $142 million to acquire a Joint Strike missile. As you know, there was the GWEO enterprise under the previous government only really produced two things, and they were two media releases. But I'm happy to provide further information. I thought that this was directly relevant to the question you were asking.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Van, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister, and it's a shame that more wasn't or hasn't been done. I think it's safe to say, and it's covered in many media, but I can table something if required, that one of the companies that GWEO have contracted as a prime is called Raytheon Australia. Raytheon Australia, I thought you might, Senator Shoebridge. Raytheon Australia is a subsidiary of RTX, as it's now known, a US company that was fined $200 million for leaking secrets to Russia, Iran and China. Are you aware of, is the government aware of this?
Senator Van, the time for asking has expired. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. I would say to you, Senator Van, obviously I have seen public reporting of the settlement to which you refer. I would make the point that this is a settlement between the US government and RTX. The advice I have is this is a matter for the US government, and we're not in a position to comment on the details of that settlement. What I can say to you after is the advice I have is that Defence has referred. Defence works across government and cooperates with partners, including the United States, to regulate the export and supply of goods and technology controlled on the Defence and Strategic Goods list. Defence has referred the matter to the Australian Border Force for investigation. I'm not in a position, obviously, to comment in any detail on that matter. What I can say is Australia has a stringent export control framework which is designed to prevent the irresponsible or illicit trade of military and dual-use items.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Van, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, given that one of the key primes involved with GWIO has had a huge settlement against it for leaking of security breaches, would you agree that the best way to protect our future guided weapons sovereignty is to work with and enable Australian companies to manufacture these weapons here in Australia?
Thank you, Senator Van. Minister Wong.
Well, that is, I'm asked for an opinion, President, and I probably won't proffer that, but I can make an observation, which I've made before, I think, in Senate estimates, that obviously when you're looking at defence capability, there are a number of matters which need to be considered. Obviously, capability, the value for money for taxpayers, and also assuring that a sovereign capability for Australia in those areas where that is necessary for our national security, and that is the approach the government seeks to take.
Thank you, Minister Wong. Senator Lambie.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is for the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Minister Wong. Meta, the owner of Facebook and Instagram, recently told this parliament they have over 130 employees in Australia. Their business here is, in their own words, a reseller of advertising services. But none of these employees seem to work on safety for Australian users. Apparently Meta thinks it's okay to globally outsource all that to Singapore and beyond, and we don't have laws telling them otherwise. Why is the Albanese government going to spend millions of taxpayers' money on trying to keep under-16s off social media before it legislates mandatory protections on social media companies?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. Minister Wong.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Lambie, for the question, and I think this is a domain where government regulation and the right public policy settings do require consideration by this parliament, by parliaments, by the community, as well as by the government. And what I would say to you is I don't think that the introduction of legislation imposing age limits to protect children is in place of or should be excluded by the points that you raise. We are obviously aware of Meta's decision to walk away from commercial deals in relation to the Meta decision and announcement that it will no longer pay Australian news organisations for news content. Obviously, we all want a healthy, sustainable and diverse news media in Australia. That is important for our democracy, and it does include working out how it is that we ensure that large digital platforms utilise reasonable news information, and that these are under fair and equitable arrangements with the creators of content. We have been very clear that we think that what Meta has done is a dereliction of its responsibilities to Australian users. The government, of course, has established the Joint Select Committee on Social Media and Australian Society. That is one of the reasons. This backdrop is one of the reasons for that decision. We do believe that Australians should continue to have access to public interest journalism, including on social media, and we hope that the work that the committee does, and I'm aware of your interest in this, Senator, that together we can work out what is the best way forward on this issue.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Lambie, first supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. About 75% of unwanted minor contact to kids, also known as grooming, on Facebook's products comes from a feature called People You May Know. Last week, Facebook told the parliament that this feature is deliberately left on for under-18s in Australia. Has the Prime Minister directly raised the issue with Meta on this?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. Minister Wong.
Senator, I wasn't aware of that evidence until you just, from last week, until you just outlined it. I think that is grotesque, and I think all Australians would agree that we would want our children protected in whatever, from all of the ways in which the online world can cause harm. And our regulatory system does require us as parliamentarians, as legislators, as members of executive government to do more. We know that the online world does present new and emerging risks. What I would say to you is we have quadrupled the e-safety base funding to bring it to $42.5 million each year, with funding ongoing and indexed in recognition of the range of risks that online users face. And we have brought forward the independent review of the Online Safety Act. But none of that detracts from the ethical obligations and the responsibilities that these platforms have.
Thank you,
that
Minister.
They are
the
not
time for answering has expired.
Australians.
Senator Lambie, second supplementary.
Thank you. More than 14 years ago, the Australian Law Reform Commission warned of the risks to young people on social media. Since then, Big Tech has successfully lobbied to lower default privacy settings for kids in Australia from 18 down to 16. Does the government now intend to correct that error of judgment?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. Again, Senator Lambie, what I would say to you is, whether it's through the work of the committee, the work of the independent review of the Online Safety Act, or the ongoing work of e-safety, these are matters which we do need to look at. We have a domain which has expanded more rapidly in terms of reach and usage and penetration into particular markets in our communities, well beyond the regulatory framework that was in place. I think governments are seeking to catch up, and I regret that it is disappointing that we didn't see very much on this in the last 9 years prior to our election. But we are seized of this. We are very. We understand how important it is. It is a very difficult area, and governments around the world are grappling with it. And we welcome your and the crossbenchers' interest in this area.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Green.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Resources, Senator Farrell. I refer to the Albanese Labor government's commitment to growing Australia's critical minerals industry to deliver secure, well-paid jobs and a future made in Australia. How will the production tax incentive for critical minerals encourage processing onshore, add value to our resources here in Australia and build a strong, resilient economy?
Thank you, Senator Green. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Green. And I know you come from that great resources state of Queensland. No, it'll stay great. Don't you worry. As this side of the chamber understands, the road to net zero is paved with Australian resources. Resources not only extracted in Australia, but processed locally to create secure jobs and open up more pathways for skills and training. And that includes critical minerals, an apt name given how critical they are to renewable technologies like solar panels and electric vehicles. Look, why don't you solve your own problems with your former leader of the opposition in South Australia, Senator? Why don't you focus on him rather than interfering with me? That's why. No, I know you're embarrassed by it. That's why the Labor Party announced the production tax incentive. For critical minerals, that's very unfair. I think you should withdraw that. For tax incentives for critical minerals as part of the most significant budget for the resources sector in a generation. It's a foolproof, no-risk approach to grow our critical minerals industry, strengthen supply chains and create well-paid jobs in the regions. Modelling shows that building downstream critical minerals processing could generate $70 billion in GDP and create an additional 143 jobs by 2040.
Has expired. Senator Green, first supplementary.
Thanks, President, and thank you, Minister, for outlining how the Albanese Labor government will grow our critical minerals industry to create secure jobs and capitalise on the transition to net zero as we deliver a future made in Australia. Who is supportive of the production tax incentive and the boost it will deliver to the critical minerals projects across the country?
Thank you, Senator Green. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Green for her first supplementary question. The Albanese Labor government's production tax incentive isn't just supported by the resources sector, it was developed in consultation with them. And it's no wonder that the WA Nationals are supportive, and that includes the Nationals candidate for Bullwinkle, Mia Davies, who has she has welcomed downstream incentives. The leader of the WA Nationals, Shane Love, has said it is essential not just for Western Australia and not just for Australia but for the Western world to pursue production tax incentives like this. And it's not just the Nationals. Chalice Mining, who are developing a mining project in the Bullwinkle electorate, have hailed Labor's budget as providing crucial support to critical minerals.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Green, second supplementary.
Thanks, President, and thank you, Minister, for outlining why the sector supports the Albanese Labor government's production tax incentive for critical minerals to create secure jobs and encourage processing onshore. Minister, what is standing in the way of Labor's future made in Australia and our production tax credits, and what is at risk if future made in Australia isn't implemented?
Thank you, Senator Green. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Green for her second supplementary question. You don't have to look further than those opposite to see what's standing in the way of the production tax incentive for critical minerals. The Coalition opposed it within minutes of budget night and labelled it corporate welfare for billionaires. Well, the future—that's what they did, yep. Well, the Future Made in Australia legislation has now passed the House, with 45 Liberals and Nationals speaking against the bill and refusing to support the production tax incentive. The 5 Liberal senators from Western Australia will have an opportunity to speak on this legislation, and I'm looking forward to you, Senator Brockman, and your colleagues supporting our production tax incentives.
Minister Wong.
President, I ask that further questions be placed on notice.